Ladies and gentlemen, humble greetings to you all, respected panelists, dignitaries and moderator, intellectuals, theorists, thinkers who are all here today. Me, as the president of the Bengal Club, pleased to welcome you all to the Bengal Club National Debate on Trial Media, Is This a Curse to Our Democracy? I first start by acknowledging my confrere in the General Committee, Dr. Sandip Chatterjee, for curating a motion like this that raises a question which possibly is in the mind of all. As we wake up in the morning, whether we put our eyes on the newspaper or on the mobile, we keep on getting all the news from the West, Dalit protagonists, to the activists in the South, to from in North India politics, to an East India side, any murder. We form our judgment, we form our opinions. We don't wait for the court to pass any judgment. And much before the court comes to a verdict, we already have formed our opinion in my own court, in the court in my mind, whether the guy is to be guillotined, hanged, or to be freed. But this topic on the press freedom, how much press rightly or wrongly influences readers or gets into the province of law, is not a topic of just today. It has been there perennially for long, and hardly any intellectual or political big names have refrained from making a quote on this subject. I mean, interestingly, Mark Twain said, "It seems to me that just in the ratio of the newspapers increase, our morals also decrease." Whereas a strong advocate of the free press, Thomas Carlyle, George Bernard Shaw, Thomas Carlyle made a quote that he felt that the four pillars of the democracy, press is one, in addition to the executive, judiciary, and the legislative. Now, how much this one pillar will be intersecting with the other pillar, which is the legislation, is something I'm sure the panelists and the debaters will be debating today. Thomas Jefferson interestingly commented, "Were it left on me to decide whether we should have a government without a newspaper or a newspaper without a government, I should not hesitate for a moment to choose the latter." But I think late 2020, early 2021 in India, this motion got a renewed life and relevance, and therefore this motion today may address many of the questions that confront us, that make us puzzled or set us thinking. Our own Press Act of 1867 augmented, changed multiple times, addendums to it, numerous examples of trial by media in India, from historical Wahhabi conspiracy to the Rana Ayub case, which even prompted New York Times to write big articles on the Indian press freedom, may possibly be all in the points of an interesting discussion later in the evening, helping us to draw some sensible, informed inferences of our own at the end. We may go home thinking, is sunlight truly the best disinfectant, and electricity the efficient policeman, as Justice Louis Bernard would have said if he was here?
The final speaker from the proposing side, Sandip Chatterjee, who has been described as many things, including being a debate fixer.
Mr. Chairman, sir, we excuse Boria for using the term fixation and fixers, because we know he's intimately involved with the IPL, and we quite understand his sentiments. Mr. Chairman, sir, ladies and gentlemen, we have nothing against the media from this side. If we did, we wouldn't have the Honorable President of the Press Club on our side. We have nothing against the press, whether it's Mr. Boria, Mazumdar, or anybody else. We strongly believe that the media is one of the four pillars, with the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary, that support the platform on which resides the idol, or perhaps the ideal, or perhaps the idea of democracy. But it is our contention from this side of the floor that when the media, the pillar of the media, lowers its standards by thinking that it can pass judgment on everything and everybody, or when the pillar of media, like Mr. Siddharth Varadarajan just told you, can substitute the other pillars of the executive and the judiciary because it thinks it's far more important, then I'm afraid there is an unevenness of the platform on which democracy is perched, and democracy can come to a tantalizing slide down to Mother Earth, and that is what we fear from this side of the floor. There is one thing worse than an uninformed person with power, and that is an uninformed person with power who does not know when to stop using his power. And that is the summary of the motion that you see before you today. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason why we think that trial by media is a curse of democracy is based on 4 letters: A, B, C, and D. A for avarice, B for bias, C for our Constitution, and D for destruction. And I will highlight these 4 letters to you. A for avarice. What is it that makes media indulge in these so-called trial where they think they can pronounce judgment ahead of the police or the judiciary? The reason is not TRP, the right principles. The reason is TRP, television rating points. And in a country where you have more television channels in a city than you have free health clinics, it is not any surprise that each one is vying with the other to have more TRPs. And the only way they can do it is to sensationalize, to try people, to pronounce judgment ahead of the judiciary, ahead of the police. And it is prompted by greed and avarice. The Right Honorable Mr. Paranjay Guha talked about trials by media that have made a difference to the fabric of our democracy. I will remind him of some. In 2015, Jasleen Kaur posted a photograph of one called Sarvjit Singh, saying this man in Delhi had caused sexual harassment to her. Television channels jumped into the fray, called Sarvjit Singh a pervert. He was called the predator of Delhi. He was called the most dangerous animal roaming the streets of Delhi. He lost his job. He lost his wife. He could not send his children to school. In 2019, the courts cleared him of every single accusation, and he was considered to have been wrongfully accused. But the trial by media completely ended his family. And where was the media to report on what had happened to him? They maintained a stoic silence. The Shunandan Pushkar case, the Shunandan Pushkar death case, which was immediately christened by the media as the Shunandan Pushkar murder case. And we had all these stories of a Right Honorable Member of Parliament and one of Mr. Johar Sharkar's colleagues, as if he was moving around the streets of Delhi with blood dripping from his fingertips, looking for like Lady Macbeth for the perfumes of Arabia to sweeten his hand, which was covered with blood smear from a lady. What happened? Same in the Jessica Lal case, same in the Indrani Mukherjee case, same in the Sushant Singh Rajput case, where the media seemed to have decided all the people that were responsible for his committing suicide. A for avarice, B for bias. Every single trial by the media is biased. And I'm reminded of the story where a postdoctorate student invites 100 people to an auditorium. 10 in the front seat are media people, 90 are common people. And he says, I'm going to tell you about the greatness of a chemical compound called dihydrogen monoxide. He says this is a compound that is essential to life. We must respect it. We must preserve it. We need it for the future of mankind. And a media person from the front row, most of them had qualifications, their highest qualifications were school leaving exams at the end of class 10, challenges this postdoc student and says, no, this is a compound that causes severe burns when it is in gaseous form. Another media person stands up and says, this is a compound that corrodes and rusts metals. Another media person says, it kills millions of Indians every year. Another media person says, this compound is found in malignant tumors. Causes acid rain. Somebody else says it causes excessive irritation and bloating if consumed. And a last media person stands up, faces the public and says, this is a chemical that will kill you because when you're dependent on it, when you don't get it, you die. 80 out of those 90 common people voted that this is a compound that should be banned from Mamta's state, Modi's country, and Putin and Biden's planet. And do you know what this compound dihydrogen oxide was? It was water. So easy is it for the press to distort facts and completely change our minds in what they think is a way they can subvert public opinion. This is public opinion for you, sir. And of course, there is another bias. And that is political bias. You know, when media decided they needed to try people to increase their points, the three people they chose as victims were police officers, doctors, and politicians. Because these were the most susceptible people of society. And they could get lots of brownie points by saying that every policeman that solved a crime did so because he took money and bribes. Every death that occurred in society was because of negligence of a doctor. And every politician, whatever he did, was based on political motives and not social justice. The politicians then did what was the best thing. They bought the media. So the media is either a BJP media or a Trinamool media or a leftist media. So much so that if I need to find out information in the morning, I have to read the Times of India and the Telegraph, and I know the truth is the perpendicular bisector between the two. The third C you have heard is the Constitution, and my colleagues have elaborated on Act 21, and I will not go into the details of that. The fourth D is destruction. And the main reason why I think we do not like trial by the media is its destructive potential. I'll tell you my own experience. After a lot of persuasion in our hospital, we persuaded a neurosurgeon who had a brain-dead patient to agree to try and persuade that family to go in for organ transplant. The professor and head of cardiac surgery from Medical College came down and said, please transfuse 4 units of blood. We need a heart in Bangalore. We're going to take that heart for transplant. There descended some people of the media. And they started broadcasting live from the hospital with the concerned doctors in front of them saying, look, patient is dead and this hospital is transfusing blood. These are bloodsuckers. These are horrible people. And this went on the air live. It affected the transplant program in this city and set it back by 10 years. Though the two young people that covered this event, just freshly out of school, would never know the damage they had done to a very important medical program in this city. Mr. Chairman, sir, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I would say that from this side, we do not like trial by the media for these 4 reasons. It is based on avarice or greed, money or TRP. B, it is based on bias. The bias may be political bias. The bias may be bias, as I showed you, because you can easily affect public opinion in the way you paint something. C is it is against the Constitution. And D, it has a destructive potential like nobody else, because instantly you can tell 1 million people what they want to believe, but what is not necessarily true. And I conclude by saying again, we have nothing against the media. I understand, though, that when the other 3 pillars of the democracy are lowering its standards, the media is often forced to do the same to keep the platform level. Thank you very much.
So there you have it, the alphabets of the motion from Shondip Chatterjee. Shondip Chatterjee, to sum up for the proposition, may I voice a concern, let this not descend to a match or a debate between Boria Mazumdar and Shondip Chatterjee. That is not the issue. This is not some kind of a in-Bengal club feud.
Do you know how long it takes to become a brain surgeon? 5 years as a doctor, 2 years you train 7, 3 years you do general surgery 10, 1 year, again you give exams, 3 years, 13, you become a brain surgeon, and then you spend the first 3 years in training. 16 years before you're a brain surgeon that somebody consults for his brain. Do you know how long it takes to destroy everything that you have done in those 16 years? 30 seconds. From a television camera totting individual belonging to the media that tries you, goes and exposes falsely, this man did a wrong surgery and killed this very important person. 30 seconds, all it takes to destroy everything you have learned in 16 years. And the Right Honorable Mr. George Sarkar will want to know, how does it affect democracy? It affects democracy, Mr. Sarkar, because nobody wants to become brain surgeons in this country anymore. It's too much of a risk, too long a training that can be destroyed by a simple, uneducated member of the media who wants to try you. And therefore, Mr. George Sarkar, 10 years later, you will not have enough brain surgeons. And your right to treatment of brain and spine problems will not exist in this country. Though I do appreciate being a politician, most politicians do not need to consult neurosurgeons because the two organs neurosurgeons treat are brain and spine. And you have to first possess the two to get to them. Ladies and gentlemen, we oppose trial by media because we feel that the media thinks it knows everything about everybody and expresses every opinion that suits it to malign everyone it dislikes at every opportunity. Is this not a curse? We think that the media arouses mass hysteria and instigates our animal instincts, both of which masquerade then as public opinion and weighs down on the police and judges even before an investigation is commenced. Is that not a curse? When the media uses its powers of spread of misinformation to destroy an individual, to protect a journalist's job or pay packet, is that not a curse? When the media screams shameful incorrectness, taking advantages of its audio-visual reach and power to pronounce an individual guilty, destroys his life and family, vilifies the villain and vindicates the victim, choosing by itself who will be the villain and who will be the victim. Is that not a curse for democracy? Ladies and gentlemen, when the media chooses to highlight titillating torments rather than praiseworthy pursuits, when it decides to tell you about terrible tragedies rather than philanthropic programs, when it tells you about toxic trivialities rather than purity of principles, is that not a curse for democracy? And finally, ladies and gentlemen, when the media paints before you fragments of misinformation, they have a term for it, they call it breaking news, fragments of misinformation. Is that not a curse? Imagine members of the Bengal Club before you go to vote. A camera-trotting media person who comes to the doorsteps of the Bengal Club, and these camera-trotting individuals are more dangerous to the fabric of democracy than the tanks streaming into Kyiv as we speak today. Imagine this man focuses on the emblem of the club, the cobra, and says, can you imagine a snake, a terrible, dangerous snake? This is the symbol of this club. How can anybody enter this club? The public will accept it and buy it. That's the problem, and that is why we would like to propose the motion and want you to vote on this side.
So we've had I think, a fair display of eloquence. regarding freedom of fair speech and freedom of fair trial. Now it's for you to decide which way your votes fall on this motion. The motion reads, it's right there before you, but for reasons of protocol, the motion reads, trial by media is a curse of our democracy. So interestingly, all examples were taken from the Indian scene, so our was emphasized here. So may I now ask those of you who are in favor of the motion to please raise your hands. So I hope nobody's raising two hands. Okay. Those of you who are against the motion, I think the motion is carried. Thank you. You've been a very engaged and patient audience, listeners, and thank you all the speakers. As I said, it's been a rare display of eloquence and erudition. Thank you so much. Have a very good evening.